Have you ever found yourself in a conversation where the person across from you spoke with such absolute confidence that you started doubting your own knowledge, despite knowing deep down that they were wrong? Or maybe you've worked with someone who clearly lacked the necessary skills, yet somehow believed they were outperforming everyone else. On the flip side, perhaps you've doubted your own abilities, even when others around you consistently recognized your talent. These seemingly everyday scenarios are actually prime examples of a well-documented psychological phenomenon called the Dunning-Kruger Effect, first described in 1999 by psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger. The Dunning-Kruger effect reveals a paradox in human self-perception. People with low ability in a specific domain tend to overestimate their competence, while those with high ability are more likely to underestimate their own skills. Put simply, the less someone knows, the more they tend to believe they know everything. Meanwhile, the more someone knows, the more aware they are of how much they still don't know. It's a paradox that may seem counterintuitive, but it plays out in real life more often than we might like to admit. The reason this effect exists lies in what psychologists call metacognition, our ability to evaluate our own thinking and performance. When someone lacks knowledge or skill, they also lack the tools to recognize their own shortcomings. They don't know what they don't know. It's like a beginner chess player who believes they've mastered strategy because they know how the pieces move, all while missing the deeper, more nuanced layers of the game. Without enough expertise to understand what mastery actually looks like, overconfidence creeps in effortlessly. On the other hand, true experts often see just how complex their field really is. They recognize its vastness, its subtleties, and the continuous learning it demands. That awareness breeds humility, not because they lack confidence, but because they understand the limits of human knowledge. A classic example can be found in talent shows like American Idol, where contestants with no vocal training passionately perform off-key, yet argue vehemently when judges critique their singing. They genuinely believe they're great, and their unwavering confidence becomes part of the spectacle. What's happening here is not just entertainment, it's the Dunning-Kruger effect in action. Their limited skills are not only failing to produce good results, they're also preventing them from accurately assessing how bad those results really are. This effect doesn't just show up in flashy TV moments or social awkwardness, it has serious implications in education, business, and leadership. A team member who lacks the competence for a task but assumes they're excelling can lead projects astray, reject constructive feedback, and hinder group progress. At the same time, truly capable individuals may remain in the background, second-guessing themselves, asking, "Have I done enough? Or what am I missing?" Their hesitance doesn't stem from ignorance, it stems from a deep understanding that there's always more to learn. It's important to clarify, the Dunning-Kruger effect doesn't mean that people with low skills are foolish, or that all experts are modest saints. It simply points to a recurring psychological pattern. When we know little, we often believe we know more than we do. When we know more, we realize how much more there is to know. This isn't about labeling people, it's about awareness. And the truth is, all of us can fall into the Dunning-Kruger trap at different points in our lives, especially when we enter a new area where we lack experience. Imagine learning to drive. After a few weeks, you might feel like you've got it all figured out. But that early confidence might blind you to the nuanced, real-world situations you're not yet prepared for. It takes time, and humility, to recognize the full landscape. This psychological gap is sometimes described as a failure of metacognition. When someone doesn't have the knowledge, they also lack the self-awareness to recognize that they're not knowledgeable. And when feedback is offered, they might reject it, believing they're right and others are wrong. This can lead to a dangerous feedback loop. the more overconfident they are, the less likely they are to seek growth. The less they learn, the more blind spots they develop. Meanwhile, competent individuals are often hyper-aware of the consequences of getting things wrong. They question themselves not out of insecurity, but out of responsibility and depth of understanding. There's even a visual model that represents this effect, commonly referred to as the Dunning-Kruger curve. In the early stages of learning, confidence skyrockets. This is the infamous peak of Mount Stupid, where people believe they've figured it all out. But then, as learning deepens, confidence plummets into the valley of despair, when people begin to realize just how complex things really are. Eventually, with more time, experience, and reflection, confidence climbs again, but this time more gradually. So how can we avoid falling into the Dunning-Kruger trap ourselves? The first step is honest self-reflection. Ask yourself, am I truly qualified to speak or act in this situation? Or what might I be missing here? Replacing certainty with curiosity opens the door to growth. The second step is listening, genuinely listening, to feedback, especially from those with more experience. Feedback isn't always comfortable, but it's one of the most accurate mirrors we have. And finally, cultivate a lifelong learning mindset. When you approach any domain with the belief that you haven't yet mastered it, you remain open, humble, and hungry to improve. That said, we must also remember that high-ability individuals sometimes need to be reminded of their worth. Excessive humility can lead to missed opportunities, underperformance, or even self-sabotage. In the balance between self-doubt and overconfidence lies the sweet spot, knowing your value without arrogance, recognizing your limits without insecurity. You might be better than you think, or perhaps not as good as you imagine. But the only way to find out is through honest awareness and ongoing learning. The Dunning-Kruger effect isn't just a psychological curiosity, it's a human reality. It reminds us that wisdom begins with the words, "I might be wrong." That those who learn deeply often speak softly. And that true confidence doesn't come from thinking you know everything, it comes from knowing what you don't. In a world that often rewards loudness over depth, those who pause to reflect, to ask, to listen, and to learn are the ones who grow the most, because in the end, it's not about proving you're right. It's about becoming someone who is willing to grow, one honest insight at a time.